Everybody here recognizes the Bible has two divisions, Old and New Testament. This morning I want you to think about putting a third division in here. Let me explain what I mean to you by that. If we were to put a division in Genesis chapter 3, what does that do for us? If I asked you, what was man's relationship like to God prior to Genesis 3? Realistically, we were in a covenant relationship. We were literally in the presence of God. In Genesis chapter 3, that relationship is shattered, right? Sin, and here's the world. And here's my point. The entire rest of the book, from Genesis 3 all the way to the book of Revelation, is trying to tell us how to get back into that covenant relationship with God, ultimately through Jesus Christ. And yet, here's the thing that some people don't get. When you erase the literal creation account from the Bible, what you're doing is you're totally undoing the scheme of redemption of man. Because if there wasn't really an Adam, and there wasn't really sin, then why do we really need a Savior? And that's the bottom line. The problem is, as I see it, evolutionists are waging war before parents even realize there's anything going on. And in many cases, they've already got our kids. Long before they've got them enlisted in their battle, long before we even know there's a war going on. And the reason I say that is because you have a child, say the age of 5, they have already been indoctrinated into evolution. Why would I say that? Because how many 5-year-olds are not absolutely enthralled with the dinosaurs? Folks, kids love them. You think about it for just a minute. They fill up our houses with all kinds of dinosaur paraphernalia. In fact, I tell parents, if you have not stepped on a plastic dinosaur figurine in the middle of the night, you're not qualified yet as a parent, okay? It ranks up there with stepping on Legos. Kids love them, and evolutionists know it. This is basically their sugar stick candy to our kids. And so at a very young age, children are starting to associate ancient ages with creatures that walked before man. But it's not just kids that love them. Think about it. We adults love them too, don't we? And as such, magazines, they love to put their picture on the cover because they know when they do that, they're almost guaranteed increased sales. And so they tell us, for instance, about where they were discovered, or what they think they ate, or, for instance, the largest dinosaur that we have discovered to date, a creature called the Argentinosaurus. This guy allegedly weighs 110 tons. Now, give you an idea how big that is? Our largest imperial elephant weighs about 9 tons. This guy weighed 110. In fact, if you want to see a replica, you got to go to the Fermac Museum in Atlanta, just down the road, so to speak, where he stretches from one end of the museum to the next. And to really put this in perspective, everybody look at the screen for a minute. On this right-hand side, that's a full-size T-Rex that doesn't come up to this guy's hip bone. They were impressive. But folks, it is because of these same dinosaurs that realistically, we're losing a lot of our kids. Because by the time Christian parents realize there's a battle going on, our kids have already bought hook, line, and sinker the evolutionary timeline. In fact, let me show you. Let's walk through the life of a young person here in Richmond Hill. We'll start at age 2. When we start filling up the house with all kinds of dinosaur paraphernalia. We've got the games and the figurines and the books. In fact, some of the grandparents in this room, you're guilty of buying books without even opening them to see that they say, dinosaurs walked this earth millions of years ago. Your kid gets a little bit older. It's December in Georgia. It's a little bit cool out. So while mom is over standing stirring that instant oatmeal, The child is sitting at the table reading all about evolution. They hit 5 years of age. Now they're eating everything. All they ever want is snacks. And so we start feeding them snacks. Now we're feeding them evolution. They finally hit age 7. And they're behaved enough now to actually go to a fine dining establishment, okay? So we load them up in the car and we go somewhere like Wendy's, where they learn about evolution. Or maybe your child doesn't like Wendy's. Maybe they like Arby's. All the while learning about evolution. They hit 8 or 9 years of age. Now they're going on field trips and they go to local museums where they again are exposed to these ancient periods. Or maybe they run up to somewhere like the Smithsonian. Or maybe they go to the Fern Bank in Atlanta. Or maybe they run up to Chicago to the Field Museum where Sue is on display. Now take a look at that picture for just a moment. I want you to ask yourself, how many parents actually thought about what their kids would be reading when they signed those permission slips for them to go on that field trip? Because I took that picture. And I also took a picture of what they're reading on those placards. And folks, listen to me, there is no way to harmonize what those kids are reading with God's Word. They get a little bit older. Now they're reading chapter books. 10, 11 years of age, and all of a sudden, they start reading things like the Magic School Bus. And I want to do this just to impress upon the parents for a minute. Young people, let me see your hands really high if you're familiar with the Magic School Bus. Oh wow, we got some older young people. Very, very popular kids series. And fairly popular with the old people too. You open it up, you got a dinosaur chasing a caveman. But notice what it says. This story is make-believe. There were no dinosaurs in the time of cave people. In fact, in the top left-hand corner it says, no people ever saw a dinosaur. When early humans appeared on the earth, dinosaurs had already been dead for millions of years. People found out about dinosaurs from fossils. Or maybe your child likes the Magic Treehouse. Another very popular kids series. In fact, this one, you open it up, you're not even actually into the book yet. You're still in the introduction when they're talking about human beings, of course, had not yet evolved. You open the middle of the book. You remember that geologic column that we just dismantled? Yeah, there it is, right in the middle of the book. Having humans coming along at the very end. Your kid hits 12, 13. Now they're taking science classes. They take biology, maybe they have to take botany to study plants. And one semester they come home with a new textbook called Evolution Changes Over Time. Prentice Hall book. Now, do you think that they would use dinosaurs to teach our kids evolution? Like if we were to open this book up, would we find any information in it about dinosaurs? Well, let's look. For instance, page 10, page 16, page 25, page 28, page 29, page 36, page 38, page 39, 46, page 66, page 96, page 97, 98, 99, page 100. In fact, in a 100-page textbook, 32 of them talk about dinosaurs. As I said, this is their sugar stick candy. This is how they're hooking our kids. Now, just to make sure everybody in this room understands what the dilemma really is, take a look at the screen for a minute. Right now, textbooks are teaching our young people that dinosaurs died out roughly 65 million years ago, and that we came along carrying our clubs roughly 3 million years ago. That's what they're saying. And yet, the Bible paints a totally different picture. The Bible talks about the fact that everything is created in 6 literal days. And if I were to ask you, what day were the land-dwelling creatures created on? It's day 6. What day was man created on? Day 6. Folks, that being the case, that means we would have had to coexist. Now, I realize some of you in this room, you're thinking, there's no way, what's this guy talking about? Because you've never ever even thought about the possibility. But folks, the reality is, if this book is true, and it is, there's no way around it. Man had to coexist with the dinosaurs. You know, the question is not, did they exist? Because we know they did. We found their fossilized remains on all 7 continents, Arctic to Antarctic and everywhere between. In fact, a week and a half ago, I was talking to a man, just came back from Antarctica, had found some new dinosaur discoveries down there. Several months ago, I was getting off a plane, Oregon. Had a preacher buddy call me, he said, "Brad, we need you to come to our church." He goes on to reveal the fact they've got bones. Now, I'm thinking, okay, y'all got bones in your church? You got bigger problems, you know? I've heard of people passing snakes, but he ends up telling me, he said, "No, we're digging an elevator shaft." And he said, we found bones. Sure enough, I showed up. I got all kinds of bones. We spent hours digging these things out, taking measurements, taking pictures. I've got great pictures of them. And I tell people, you know, if you don't think there's dinosaurs in the church, I got pictures of them, okay? It's not a question of did they exist. The real question is when did they exist? Church, we did ourselves a disfavor 30, 40 years ago. We told a generation of people that either they didn't exist, they were imaginary, or God put their bones in the ground just for us to dig up later. Okay, well, last time I checked, he's not the author of chaos. They really did exist. The question we need to ask ourselves is when? How important is this whole thing to the creation versus evolution controversy? I want you to read a quote by a guy named Philip Kitchen. Look at what he says. He claimed that solid evidence of humans coexisting with the dinosaurs, look at this, would shake the foundations of the evolutionary theory because, of course, the dinosaurs are supposed to have been long extinct by the time hominids arrived on the scene. So what are you saying? If you've got evidence of humans and dinosaurs coexisting, it's going to shake the foundations of the evolutionary theory. Which is one reason why every single thing promoting dinosaurs starts out by saying they lived millions of years ago. People have never seen them. Well, today we're going to look at some evidence. Evidence that's not in your kid's textbook. Evidence that most definitely is not going to be viewed by CNN. It's evidence that proves the Bible. Before I do that, I need to take about 30 seconds to give you a real quick history lesson. The word dinosaur itself actually came into existence in the year 1845. I want you to kind of put that right up here somewhere. 1845, a guy by the name of Sir Richard Owen actually coined the term dinosaur. He used 2 Greek words, dinos, sauros, translated by him as fearfully great lizard. That was 1845. Since then, we found all kinds of dinosaur fossils. As I mentioned, the question is not really did they exist, the question is when did they exist. Let's look at some evidence together. We're going to start January of 2005 when researchers very quietly announced that they had discovered a dinosaur fossilized in the belly of a mammal. And you say, so what, Brad? Okay, don't forget the fact that evolutionists would have us believe mammals evolved from the dinosaurs millions of years later, and yet you got a mammal that was eating one? What's that do with their timeline? Or maybe somebody could explain to me this Mesopotamian cylinder seal that looks an awful lot like what you and I would call an apatosaurus. This is a cylinder that was found over in Mesopotamia. This is what they used to use to actually kind of give their signature, so to speak. They've got a lot of it in the British Museum of History. How did they know what to carve if they'd never seen this? Or while we're talking about archaeology, maybe somebody in here could explain to me these tablets that are attributed to Narmer, the legendary first pharaoh of a united Egypt. that have dinosaur-like creatures on them. Or maybe you can explain to me these Ica stones from Peru. A gentleman by the name of Dr. Javier Cabrera was given one of these stones as a birthday gift. He looked on it. He noticed it had these elegant carvings. He asked the man, he said, "Hey, where did you get these?" The native farmer who had given it to him, he said, "These are burial stones that the ancient Incan Indians would place into their tombs." Well, Dr. Cabrera set out to find as many of these burial stones as he could. All told, he found about 11,000 of them. And over a third of them had very elegant pictures of dinosaurs on them. All kinds, all shapes, and not just dinosaurs. In some cases, they got dinosaurs and men. In fact, take a look at this one at the bottom. I love this one. You got a guy who's wearing Incan drab. He's got a spear. He's hunting it. And you say, "Well, surely, Brad, these are fakes. Surely these are like, internet hoax." And I'm going to tell you freely, right up front, there's always going to be people wanting to make money off fakes. Correct? Folks, the real ones got details right that we would not understand until years later. I'm going to give you one example. I could give you three. On the screen, you see three of the stones in the Cabrera Museum. You'll notice they got highlighted in yellow. They've got these dermal frills on the back of sauropod dinosaurs. For the longest time, researchers said that's not right. We've never seen a sauropod dinosaur with these dermal frills. They always pictured them with that smooth, long back and neck. Well, that was until 1992, when they actually found some of those dermal frills in the fossil record. 1992, they realized, oops, they were right all along. In fact, Ellen Morris Bishop, commenting on it, she said, "The biggest spines found were about 9 inches long, shaped a little bit like a shark's dorsal fin. The smallest at the tail tip were about 3 inches high." How did they know what to draw if they'd never seen it? Or maybe somebody could explain to me this one. Buddhist temple in Cambodia, uncovered 3 short years ago. Folks, listen to me, this one you can't fake. It had been completely covered over in vegetation. They come in with what you and I would call industrial strength Roundup, kill all of the stuff. They notice this beautiful, elegant temple, all kinds of carvings on it. For instance, take a look at this guy right here. That's a monkey. You see his face, his front legs, his back legs. His tail's actually going up behind his head. This guy right here is a deer. You notice his antlers there, tail in the up position. But this artist didn't just stop with things like monkeys and deers. He also carved things like dinosaurs. In fact, drew well enough that a 10-year-old can tell me what kind it is. That's a stegosaurus. Interestingly, I had a couple of guys that went there and took pictures for me. They're taking the tour. They come up to this and they're snapping shots, and they ask the tour guide, they say, "Hey, how do you explain this?" Tour guide looks him in the eye, and this is a quote. He said, "I know what you're thinking, but we're supposed to tell you it's a porcupine." Okay, I've seen porcupines. That's not one of them. Or maybe somebody could explain to me the dinosaur figurines from Ocambarro. A gentleman was riding on the back of a horse. From that elevated position, he looks down. He sees the first of these ceramic figurines. All told, they've now found over 30,000 of these. They decided that they would have these things dated. So what they did was they took a little piece of a foot or a little piece of a tail. They sent it off to 2 labs here in the States. University of Pennsylvania and Teledyne Laboratories. And they didn't tell them where it came from. They just said, "Hey, we date it." They did. Came back with dates of roughly 2000 BC, which is when they made their mistake. Instead of waiting until they verified it in writing, they called both labs and said, "Hey, you know the stuff we're sending you? That's coming from dinosaur figurines." At which point both labs did the same thing. They said, we're sorry we're unable to give you any accurate readings on your material, and they withdrew their results. 1990 we called them, so to speak. 1990 we actually sent some bone off to the University of Arizona. We didn't tell them it was dinosaur bone, we simply said this is a blind study. They dated it roughly 9,000 years before present. And granted, that's not 6,000, but that's a far cry from 65 million. Or maybe somebody in here could explain to me this child's poncho that a buddy of mine, Dennis Swift, discovered in the tomb of an 11-year-old boy. Folks, some mom took a long time to embroider that thing. Or maybe you could explain to me the petroglyphs in National Bridges National Monument. And if you were to go there today, just outside of Glendy, Utah, there are 3 of these sandstone bridges. One of which is called Kachina. And it's on that particular bridge that the Anasazi Indians, they carved all kinds of things. And you can go there today. You can see things like bighorn sheep, and you can see things like dinosaurs. In fact, take a look at what an evolutionist admitted. A guy named Fran Barnes recognized authority on rock art in the American Southwest. He said, there's a petroglyph in National Bridges National Monument that bears a striking resemblance to a dinosaur. Why didn't he just call it a dinosaur? Because solid evidence of humans coexisting with dinosaurs would shape the foundations of the evolutionary theory. Now, for those of you in this room who came in here embracing the evolutionary theory, you can sleep good tonight because they've reanalyzed it and they've decided that that was caused by acid rain. So you're okay. You can sleep good tonight knowing that that particular figure that looks an awful lot like a dinosaur just happened to be lucky rain, so to speak. Now, while we're talking about that, on these same bridges, they've got pterodactyls and pteranodons. You know those flying reptiles? That allegedly lived millions of years before man, back during the, quote, dinosaur era. How do we explain the next 2 slides that are from historians claiming to actually have seen these flying reptiles? Take a look. The first is from a guy by the name of Harrub, Greek historian. 5th century BC. Look at what he says. There's a place in Arabia to which I went on hearing of some winged serpents. When I arrived there, I saw bones and spines of serpents in such quantities as it would be impossible to describe. The form of the serpent is like that of a large snake, but he has wings without feathers, and like as possible to the wings of a bat. All right, so let me get this straight. This guy knows the difference between birds, bats, and flying reptiles? Yeah. Or what about another historian some of you have heard of? A guy named Josephus. Jewish historian who lived during the time of the apostles, actually chronicled the death of Jesus Christ at the hands of Pilate, and he also wrote about flying reptiles. And folks, what does that do to the evolutionary theory, keeping in mind Charles Darwin wasn't even a thought back then? Or maybe somebody could explain to me this textile in the Museum of Peru, identified as a dinosaur. Or maybe you can explain to me the tomb of Richard Bell. If you ever get over to England, let me encourage you, go up to the Lake District. There's a little town called Carlisle. There's a beautiful cathedral there. Go inside and ask them to roll up the rug you see right there at the bottom of the screen. Because below that, there's the tomb of a guy who died in 1496. And remember when I told you the word dinosaur was coined? 1845. So in round numbers, this guy died about 350 years before the word even came into existence. Now, if you're like me, what you do is, instead of asking for permission, you get your children to roll up the carpet. Because, after all, who's going to get on the children? You have them roll it up, and then you see that elegant tomb, and you can immediately get down on your hands and knees. You can start picking out things like fish. You can see dogs. you can see all kinds of animals, including, guess what? Including dinosaurs. 350 years before the word came into existence. Or maybe somebody could explain to me this Mayan vase. Or these textiles from the Nazca tombs. Or maybe somebody could explain to me the discovery that Dr. Samuel Hubbard made. This guy was the curator for the Oakland, California Museum of Natural History. He took an expedition down into the Grand Canyon. He believed the American Indians had been here longer than we were giving them credit. He wanted proof. So they started looking down each one of the little side canyons, eventually making their way down the Havasupai Canyon, looking for pottery, clothing, anything that would say, yes, they were here. And he found his proof. He found their pottery, he found their clothing, but he also found their cave art. Etched into the canyon walls, there were pictures, again, that had taken men hours to carve out. You say pictures of what, Brad? Well, let's see, they had buffalo, sheep, dinosaurs, oxen, men. Run that list by me one more time. Buffalo, sheep, oxen, men, and dinosaurs. In fact, I want you to read with me what Dr. Hubbard had to say regarding his find. He said, taken all in all, the proportions are good. The huge reptile is depicted in the attitude in which man would most likely see it. Reared on its hind legs, balancing with a long tail, either feeding or in a fighting position, possibly defending itself against a party of men. He goes on to say, the fact that some prehistoric man made a pictograph of a dinosaur on the walls of this canyon upsets completely all of our theories regarding the antiquity of man. The fact that the animal is upright and balanced on its tail would seem to indicate that the prehistoric artist must have seen it alive. Now, I brought with me a picture of what Dr. Hubbard found, and I hate to be the one to tell you guys, that right there is not a sheep. It's not an ox, but it's an awfully good representation of a dinosaur we now know existed called the Edmontosaurus. How did they know what to draw if they'd never seen it? Now, while we're talking about the whole creation evolution controversy, for those of you in this room that are trivia buffs, see that little white spot? That would be a bullet hole from an evolutionist who apparently did not like the fact that we have evidence. I mean, after all, if the evidence goes against your theory, what do? You shoot it. How about this one? Soft tissue and a T-Rex. How do we explain that, folks? I actually talked to the lady who made this discovery. Her name is Mary Schweitzer. And she shared with me, she said it was really an accident that they found it. They had the long bone, the femur of this T-Rex. Now, when I say long bone, it was huge. They rented a helicopter, came and landed in their site. They're taking this bone back to the lab. It was too big, it wouldn't fit. She said we knew immediately we were going to have to cut it, so we cut it right down the middle. She said when we did that, we could actually look inside where we found soft tissue, blood vessels, and what she thinks are blood cells. Now, folks, you ask any molecular biologist worth their salt at all, they're going to tell you soft tissue, blood vessels, blood cells, they don't stick around for 65 million years. I asked her the one question that I thought was kind of pertinent. I said, Dr. Schweitzer, why do you think we've never found soft tissue in a dinosaur bone before? Her answer literally sent a chill right up my back. She said, maybe because we've never thought to look. Since that, we found soft tissue in 3 other dinosaur bones. Folks, we're now literally pulling proteins from T-Rex bones. Or maybe you could explain to me pottery found in the tombs of South America, or these burial clothes that look an awful lot like what you and I would call a dinosaur. I mean, literally, continent after continent. We go to Rome, where you've got a mural that was hand-laid tiles. And I promise you, had I not gone so long during the first lesson, I could stand up here for easily another 10 or 15 minutes and show you slide after slide after slide of humans coexisting with dinosaurs. But again, don't expect to see it in your kids' textbooks. Because after all, you show a kid this, they're going to question the evolutionary theory the rest of their life. How in the world could man have evolved from dinosaurs if we were living at the same time? And somebody says, okay, Brad, I hear what you're saying, but why aren't they mentioned in the Bible? I mean, you're going to stand up there and tell us God created man and dinosaurs on day 6. Yep. Then why don't we read about it again? Folks, that's not a fair question. And the reason I say it's not a fair question, when was your Bible translated into English? King James Version? 1611. When was the word coined? The word dinosaur, Richard Owen, 1845. How do you get a word in a book that's translated in 1611 when that word doesn't come along for another 234 years? A better question would be for you to ask me, is there compelling evidence of dinosaur-like creatures in this book? Now, that's a fair question. And to that I would say, open your Bible to the book of Job. Now, I can tell you, we can open it to the book of Isaiah. We can look in the book of Psalm, where they're also mentioned there. But I love the book of Job. Job, you got a guy, very first chapter, he is smitten with trials. He loses his wealth, his flocks. And if that's not bad enough, he loses his kids all the same day, just one after the other. And if that's not bad enough, he is then covered from the crown of his head to the bottom of his feet with boils. You remember in chapter 2, his wife, she looks at him. There he is, he's in misery. She just walks up and says, why don't you just curse God and die? But Job doesn't do that, does he? Because very soon after she made that foolish statement, Job's 3 friends come on the scene. Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar. Now, what you're going to read in the Bible for the next 25 chapters is this dialogue where these 3 friends are trying to pull out of him what they think he did. They assume he sinned and God's paying him back. So all throughout this, you'll see him say, you need to repent, man. What'd you do? Job's going, I didn't do anything. In fact, if you look at it in Job chapter 13, verse 22, Job actually requests to speak to God. He's angry. He wants to know, why is this happening? And he phrases it this way. He says, then you can speak and let me respond to you, or let me speak and you respond to me. Basically telling God, I don't care, you can go first or I go first. Well, in Job chapter 38, after Job makes his request to speak to God, we find these words. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Now prepare yourself like a man. I will question you, and you will answer me. God said, you wanted to talk? We're going to talk. Except I'm going to be the one doing all the talking. For the next 3 chapters, God deluges Job with question after question after question. If you have never read Job 38 through 40, go home tonight, read it. It is a humbling set of scriptures. He starts out by asking him, he says, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth, Job? Hey, Job, where's the dwelling place of light? Job, you see the eagle and the hawk, how do they fly? What about snow and hail, Job? How do I make those? Or Job, what about the behemoth? Job chapter 40, verse 15. Look now at the behemoth which I made along with you. He eats grass like an ox. See now his strength is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. What's a behemoth? That's not a word you see every day, is it? Somebody says, well, Brad, my Bible's got a little footnote here that says it's either an elephant or a hippopotamus. Well, let me remind you, your footnotes are not inspired, are they? But I'll go along with you for a minute. Let's actually use our brains and see what the description of this thing sounds like. It says, lo now his strength is in his loins, the force is in the navel of his belly. So obviously this is a creature that had a big belly, right? That guy have a big belly? Yep. That guy have a big belly? Yep. That guy have a big belly? Yep, keep reading. Job chapter 40, verse 17. He moveth his tail like a cedar. Sinews of his stones are wrapped together. Now, when it's talking about a cedar here, it's going to be talking about some of the largest of trees. You say, Brad, how do you know that? Well, we do a little word study in the Bible. We learned that it was the cedars of Lebanon that were actually used to build the temple, right? Massive trees. So God here is saying it moves his tail like a cedar. All right? That begs me to ask you this question. That look like a cedar to anybody in the room? Not exactly. How about that? Not exactly. That's getting a whole lot closer, isn't it? Somebody says, but Brad, you got a problem. Because Job is a post-flood book. And by that I mean, we believe that the book of Job was actually one of the very first books of the Bible written. But the events of Job actually take place after the flood. So again, you're going to stand up there and tell us that God created man and dinosaurs on day 6. Yep. And then we've got record of this behemoth. And by the way, if you read chapter 41, you get another creature called a Leviathan. We get these two creatures in the book of Job. After the flood. Wouldn't that mean? Yep. They had to be on that boat. Now, before you pack me away in a nice rubber room, give me a minute to explain that. Let me ask you this question. Did God have to take adult animals on the boat? Did he take the juveniles? I mean, think about it. They take up less space, they eat less food, produce less waste. What was the purpose of the animals when they came off the ark? To replenish the earth, right? So it makes sense you want to have animals that have a long reproductive life ahead of them. Now, I don't mean to disrespect anybody in this room. I don't think there was any animals that got on that boat holding an AARP card. I don't think it happened. You ever seen what a dinosaur comes from? Eggs, right? Largest dinosaur egg we've ever discovered would fit very cleanly in both of my hands. So is it possible God allowed Noah to take a juvenile? I'll go ahead and tell you guys, I love the flood. I love it. I mean, I literally, about a year and a half ago, I went back. I studied it, enjoyed it. I went back and I poured myself into it for several months, researching it. Got all kinds of new material that I'm just kind of waiting to get out there. My wife says, she's like, you could go 10 hours without taking a breath on the flood. She's pretty close to right. I probably would need a little oxygen. That's a boat. Number one, that God knew the dimensions because he's the one that came up with the critters, right? 522 railroad boxcars is the conservative estimate of how big that thing is. So do I think they would fit? Yeah. Only question really remaining is what happened to them. Now, I wish I could stand up here and tell you they all died out because of, and we all go eat lunch. But the reality is we don't know for sure. And folks, listen to me. I don't have a problem looking everybody in this room in the eye saying, we don't know for sure. Because there's a lot of stuff we don't know for sure. And maybe we ought to humble ourselves occasionally and remind ourselves we're not God. Now, we do have theories. In fact, there was one actually published, couldn't believe it, about 2.5 to 3 months ago. Peer-reviewed study that said, and I'm going to try to say this as tactfully as I can, that the dinosaurs had emitted too much of their own methane and it killed them. I'll let you think about that. I brought with me 5 other theories. The one your kids will hear about is the asteroid. But really the asteroid poses more questions for me than it does solutions. How do you selectively kill stuff on the other side of the planet? Or they say an exploding star flooded the earth with intense radiation. How about this? The Earth's climate became too warm, too cold, too dry, too wet for their health. Number 4, change in the dinosaurs' diet resulted in weakened eggshells that broke after being laid. Sad to say, number 5 is a scientific theory. A laxative went, the dinosaurs died and disappeared, and they all died of constipation. I'll let you decide if that's a possible problem with them. Do I think I know what happened? Yeah, I do. Having literally just poured myself into it. I don't think anybody in this room, myself included, can appreciate what the earth was like when God declared it very good. Genesis chapter 1, verse 31. I don't think we really get that. And the reason we don't get it is because, number 1, we've never seen it. I do know that according to the fossil record, the Sahara Desert used to be a rainforest. I know Antarctica has fruit trees and palm trees growing below the ice that used to be there. I know that this earth used to be basically a mantle of spring-like loveliness all over. And I think in that environment they thrived. And then I think God unleashed His fury on sin in a worldwide flood that did change everything. It changed the climate. It changed the topography. It changed everything. It also kicked off an ice age, limiting how far they could roam. Folks, I think they were on the boat, and I think they came walking off that boat 371 days later, and they looked around and realized, we're not in Kansas anymore. And being large, cold-blooded creatures, they needed lots of vegetation. And suddenly, those little warm-blooded, fuzzy mammals, they started thriving. And folks, I believe the evidence I've showed you today proves they made it for several thousand years post-flood. But I think eventually 2 things got it. Number 1, changing climate after the flood. Number 2, what has man always done to animals we fear? We hunt them, we kill them, right? I'm going to throw one piece of scripture at you, just for you to chew on as we go to lunch. You'll pardon the pun. Turn to Genesis chapter 1. Take a look at verse 29 and 30. You'll understand in a minute. 29, God said, see, I've given you every herb that you'll see which is on the face of the earth. Every tree whose fruit you'll see, to you it shall be for food. Also to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the air, to everything that creeps on the earth in which there is life, I have given every green herb for food, and it was so. Prior to the flood, what were both man and animals? According to the Bible, they were vegetarian. Now that explains a lot. That explains how you can have dinosaurs in the same population with people without them eating them. They're vegetarian. It explains how you can get all the animals on the boat without them eating each other. They're all vegetarian. It also explains how you can get all of the food necessary on the boat because they're all vegetarian. Take a look at Genesis 9:3. Right after the flood. God making His promise to Noah. He says, every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I have given you all things, even as the green herbs. After the flood, what's He say? Fire for barbecue. You can eat meat. And folks, think about it. You're 20 years post-flood. Noah walks out and says, boys, go get us something to eat. So you got Shem and Jacob walk out and they see a squirrel. And they see a possum. And they see a stegosaurus. And they're thinking, that little guy, he's small and greasy and wouldn't feed everybody. We'll leave that guy for the people in Arkansas. We could eat on that guy for a week. Folks, here's what I'm hoping you're beginning to see. When you truly look at the evidence, when you peel back all the propaganda and you set aside the textbook lies, what you're seeing is a creation account that speaks of the Creator. You're seeing evidence that points back to Him. This afternoon, we're going to ask the question, was Darwin wrong? And we're going to look very specifically at what some of the things our kids are getting in their textbooks, straight out of their textbooks. And we're going to ask the question, are you convicted? I'm going to tell you, that particular lesson is going to look a little bit differently at the Noah account than you probably ever looked at it before. I know everybody in here has heard the whole animals 2x2, etc. This afternoon, we're going to look at it in a way in which most of you have never considered. I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Riley because we may extend lunch a little bit, but you still need to be back here on time.
We are going to extend lunch just a little bit till after 12. If we can be back as close to 1:15.